Networking in COVID times is that little bit extra difficult, a little bit more of a challenge. But you can still network regardless, so make sure you're doing it. Hey everyone, it's Emily, the Career Catalyst. I know that everything feels just that much harder right now, and networking is definitely one of those things. The deal is, though, of course, that it remains really, really essential to building your career. And so I want to make sure that you know kind of how to go about this so that you can continue to network and build those important relationships, even in this strange situation that we're in. So, of course, what you have probably noticed is that most networking is not taking place in person these days, and we're going to be doing the vast majority of any of this kind of work online. And so people keep asking me how they reach out to folks and how they have these networking conversations because they do feel that little bit less personal. And so what I recommend is that you continue to go about it the same kinds of ways that you've been doing it before. So your networking is going to look less like, hey, I'd like to meet you for a cup of coffee, and more like, do you have a few minutes? I'll buy you a virtual cup of coffee and then you can send them a gift card. And really, you're just kind of looking to capture the same information. So although it feels very different, the truth is it's not as different as you might kind of feel like it is on the surface. So reach out to people and you can connect to them through groups on Facebook or LinkedIn, through professional associations, introductions through people you know, and so forth. Same series of ways that you would use even in regular times. And then you're going to ask them for about half an hour of their time. And you don't have to use Zoom, but you'll want to use an online platform. I have found Zoom to be the least glitchy of the online platforms, but if you have a strong preference for the Google platforms or Microsoft Teams or whatever it is, definitely feel free to use whatever you're comfortable with. And then invite that person to a virtual session. And you're going to ask for approximately half an hour of their time. And then what you can do is just have some very specific questions in mind that you want to be sure you ask that person. So it feels a little bit awkward at first, particularly if you are not used to these virtual spaces yet. If you're in a profession where you haven't really moved over to these online platforms, just know that it's going to feel kind of awkward at first, but the platforms are all very easy to use. And so jump in and try to get comfortable with it. You can start with some folks you already know if you'd like to kind of get your legs under you a little bit there. So for instance, you can reach out to a person you went to college with, or a former coworker, or someone like that, your cousin, someone who's already sort of within your circle. Same thing, ask them for half hour, just say something like, hey, so I'm in a career change and I'm really interested in what you're doing, but I realize I don't know that much about it. I'd love to chat with you about what you're doing. Can we find half an hour or so on both of our calendars? And I'll send you an invitation through Zoom or whatever you're using. And for people you already know, it gets a little bit easier because, you don't have the pressure of being real clear about how to use the technology. And then if you have any goofy little stumbles, that's fine because they're already your people. And that lets you kind of work out any of the kinks you might have early on in the process, so you can get comfortable with the technology and with the idea of asking people some very targeted questions. So as you're doing these networking events with folks, I recommend that you go in with a goal in mind. What is it you want to learn from this conversation? And the deal is networking conversations are not places where you're going to go in and ask for job leads. Typically, that's just not kind of what people are interested in giving. And it does put a lot of pressure on your conversation partner. So instead of really specific job lead stuff, what you're going to be seeking is information. And so these can become kind of informational interviews. You say, how did you wind up in this field? What's your career path been? What have you liked about it? All of those kinds of questions. And you are kind of adding this to your pool of knowledge. But the other thing that you're doing with these interviewing sessions, these networking conversations, is meeting people who can get you in front of other people. And so be sure you're asking a lot of questions about them and being very friendly and warm. And then if someone is particularly useful, do follow up with a thank you. I like to encourage folks to give gift cards to local independent coffee shops. But if you have trouble finding any, sometimes it's hard to get them to take payment online and send out a virtual gift card. So if you have trouble finding them, places like Starbucks can definitely be your fallback option. But As we all know, local economies are hurting a lot. And food service, including coffee, those are definitely places that are feeling the pinch. So if you can find a local coffee shop, do it. Anyway, so what you're just going to ask in these conversations is for information about how this person got there. And it can be all kinds of stuff that you just want to know. It can be, did you have a special piece of your education that focused on this? Is there a certification that you would recommend for someone getting into this? And, you know, all those kinds of things. And particularly if you're having trouble finding a position, like if you're seeing a bunch of stuff that's part-time, or if all of the online postings are asking for 5 years of experience and you're new into the field, you just say something like, you know, I'm getting kind of frustrated because I keep seeing these job postings and it looks like they want all of this experience. And I don't know how a person who's new in this field could possibly get started. What advice would you have? And again, you're being very clear that you're asking for advice here and not leads. And that's a friendlier approach. So people are also more likely to remember that and then to give you leads when they have them. But asking for a job lead is a pretty heavy ask. And it does put someone in an awkward position because, you know, at that point, the person does not know you particularly well. And so asking for a lead is really asking for a lot. They can't recommend you personally because they've had 10 or 15 minutes of conversation with you so far. But building those relationships will then allow them to get to know more about you so that when something does come open, they're more excited about connecting you with that employer or sending you the job posting or whatever it is. And I don't know if you've heard this, it's a series of numbers that get bandied about a lot. So whatever the number is, the truth is that a lot of job postings don't actually get put in public spaces, or they get put in those public spaces after they've been shopped around kind of more internally, which means that by the time you're seeing that job posting on Indeed or wherever you're finding it, it's probably already been through the professional organization, the company's contacts through its employees, maybe a specific LinkedIn posting. And so they're going to ask for more usually when they're paying to put that job posting out there because they've already been through their sort of inner circles. And so they're going to ask for more. They're going to be more hardline about the qualifications that you bring to it and so forth. So the more you can be kind of in that inside group, the people who get notified before it goes public, the better your odds are of finding a job, particularly when you're breaking into a new industry. And so this is why networking continues to be really important and such a key component to this whole process of building a new career for yourself. And so don't be shy asking for these things. And if you have questions about any of these online platforms, let me know. I definitely don't recommend, though, that you stick with a platform that is only available to one type of user. You don't want to be using FaceTime, for instance, because people who don't use Apple products don't have access to FaceTime. So you're limiting the number of people that you can have conversations with, but explore them because all of the platforms, Teams and Zoom and GoToMeeting and all of those will have a free option that should really meet your needs. The only time you'll get limited on the ones I'm most familiar with is if you're talking to more than one person. And on Zoom, that conversation is still 40 minutes. So you can talk to 2 or 3 people for 40 minutes, which should be great plenty for what you want, or you can do a one-on-one conversation, and those are not limited on the platform. So you can still reach out to people and build some good conversations around that. And if you get invited to networking events, those are also, of course, happening in virtual spaces. So attend those events again with your goal in mind, who you want to learn about, or what kinds of questions you want to ask people kind of in the room with you. And that will keep you really focused on it, because when you get sent to those breakout rooms in those sessions that can be a little bit awkward initially, because you're sort of moving from a speaker to this sort of room full of people that you don't particularly know. So you can often be the icebreaker. So if you have a series of things that you're really curious about learning from the other folks, you can begin asking those questions. So you'll wind up in your little breakout room, have that awkward beat of silence, and then you'll say something like, so-and-so, what do you do and how did you get there? Or what do you enjoy about your job? Or what struggles have you had adapting to this new quarantine economy, or whatever it is, right? And so being that icebreaker is also a really nice piece. So yes, networking is still really essential. Yes, it feels weird and potentially kind of awkward, but try to keep doing it anyway. And let me know if you have questions about it. I can definitely answer a lot of those for you just because I do a lot of this stuff online. And I've been using these online spaces for a long time now. So let me know if you have questions, and definitely do some networking with the folks that you really want to be speaking with. Have a great weekend, everyone.